Hey lovelies, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chris, also known as the Fairy Flow Mother. Today I'll be talking with you about air drying natural hair and its effects on the hair cuticles. We're also going to be looking at hygral fatigue, which is one of the said adverse effects of air drying. And we're also going to be looking at hygral fatigue and what it has to do with deep conditioning. Um, this is a very important topic, and it's important to understand exactly what you're doing when it comes to caring for your hair, when it comes to knowing how to handle it, how to deal with it, knowing what can happen when you do it a certain way. It is important to know all of this. It is important to be in the know so that nobody is confusing you, so that you know exactly what you're doing. If you're interested in this topic and you want to know more and you want to understand how to handle your natural hair better, then don't go anywhere.
My hair is a crown that I wear with pride, a crown that I never take off. I love and nurture my natural hair with a lot of care. My natural hair is a part of whom I am and I celebrate it. My curls are gorgeous and full of life. I am confident and radiant wearing my natural hair. My natural hair is a beautiful expression of my culture and identity. I nurture my hair today so that I can wear it with pride tomorrow.
Air drying is a popular method for drying natural hair, particularly amongst those who want to avoid the potential heat damage associated with blow dryers and other heated styling tools. Now, even speaking of our ancestors, they were air drying their hairs at the time when there were no dryers, no blow dryers at all. Now, while air drying can be a gentle and effective way to manage natural hair, it is important to understand how it affects the hair cuticles and the overall health of the hair. Let's take a moment to look at the structure of natural hair. Natural hair, like all hair types, consists of three main layers: the medulla, the cortex, and the cuticle. Now, the cuticle is the outermost layer made up of overlapping scale like cells. Okay? They are meant to protect the inner layers of the hair. So they are there to protect, right? Now, the health of the cuticle is crucial because it acts as the hair's first line of defense against environmental stressors like heat, ultraviolet rays, and mechanical damage. Now, for natural hair, which often has a curly or coily texture, the cuticles can be more prone to lifting or damage. Okay? This is because the twists and turns in the hair shaft can cause the cuticles to open more easily, making the hair more susceptible to moisture loss and freeze. How does air drying affect the cuticles? When natural hair is air dried, it is allowed to dry naturally without application of heat. This process can be beneficial to the hair cuticles in several ways. First, there is reduced heat damage. Heat styling tools can cause the cuticles to become damaged or lifted, leading to dryness, leading to split ends, and breakage. Now, by air drying, you minimize the risk, helping to keep the cuticles intact and healthy. Also, because it involves a gentler drying process, this process is less harsh on the hair because it allows moisture to evaporate gradually. This can be less stressful on the cuticles compared to the rapid drying caused by blow dryers. Now, the rapid drying can lead to the evaporation of not only surface water, but also the moisture that is in the hair shaft. Natural hair, which tends to be drier due to its texture already, is especially vulnerable to this kind of moisture loss. Okay, now if you are talking about retention of moisture, hair that is air dried and hair that is blow dried. Now, because the cuticles remain in more closed position during air drying, the hair can retain moisture better. This is especially important for our kind of hair, which tends to be drier due to its structure. Now, properly moisturized cuticles lead to smoother, shinier, and hair that is less frizzy. Okay, so your hair is shinier, your hair is smoother, and there's reduced frizz. While air drying can be gentle, it can also lead to frizz if the hair is not properly prepared. So then, if the cuticles are not sealed with leave-in conditioner or oil, the hair can become frizzy as it dries. This is because as the moisture evaporates, the cuticles are lifted, leading to a rougher texture. Now, we also put into consideration the time that it takes for our hair to air dry. Natural hair can take a long time to air dry, especially if you have a lot of hair. If your hair is thick, if it's tightly curled, then it may take, a long time to dry. During this time, the cuticles are exposed to the environment, which can cause the hair to absorb humidity and become frizzy. Now, in order to mitigate this, many people choose to air dry their hair in twists, including me. Some others choose to do braids or what I call single pleats or any other protective style that will help to keep the cuticles smooth as the hair dries. To ensure that air drying is beneficial, for you and your hair and the cuticles, you can follow these tips that I'm about to mention. Now, you should be using a leave-in conditioner because applying a leave-in conditioner, what it does is it helps to smooth the cuticles and then it locks in moisture, reducing the risk of frizz as your hair dries. And then you seal with an oil. If you are doing the LOC method or the LCO method, go ahead and do so. But you know, it's important that you are sealing with an oil, or you're using a butter afterwards. So apply the leave-in, do the oil, so that this is going to help the cuticles to stay flat and smooth during the process of air drying. In other words, don't just wash your hair and allow it to air dry without applying anything. So your cuticles are going to be lifted. That is the importance of moisturizing. Then you go ahead and put your hair in the style. If it is twists, if it is braids, whatever it is, you put it in that style as it air dries. Avoid excessive manipulation. Once your hair is wet, try to avoid excessive combing or brushing, okay? Because this can cause the cuticles to lift and lead to breakage. So, like I said, just put your hair in twists or put it in braid. And then what do? You leave it alone, let it dry. So then, air drying can be healthy and an effective way to maintain the integrity of your hair and its cuticles and the overall health of your hair. While it is a gentle method, it is important to prepare your hair to avoid potential issues, like the ones that we just mentioned now. So you need to understand the effects of air drying on the cuticles. That is why I've taken my time to explain so that you are following the best practices, as much as you can to keep your natural hair looking and feeling its best. Again, it is important to understand whatever you are doing, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it this way? Why are you using this technique? It's important for you to have that understanding so that no one is confusing you. Now we're going to be talking about moisture overload or hygral fatigue. Moisture overload happens when the hair is kept in a damp or wet state for extended periods. All right, such as under a plastic cap or in a protective style that traps moisture. Now, you might be asking, what if my hair is drying in twists or braids? Does it mean that my hair can suffer hygral fatigue? Now, when your hair is left to air dry in twists after you've applied your leave-in conditioner and you've sealed with your oil or your butter, the risk of hygral fatigue is generally reduced. But it can still occur under certain conditions. So we're going to look at that. Now, hygral fatigue happens when the hair repeatedly swells with moisture and then shrinks as it dries, which can weaken the hair shaft over time, right? Now, this is more likely to happen, like I mentioned earlier, if your hair is kept in a continuously wet or damp state for prolonged periods. Note what I said, continuously wet or damp states. We're coming back to that. Now, air drying in twists with leave-in and oil. In other words, when you are air drying your hair and you have moisturized properly and you have sealed, here is what happens. There is control over moisture absorption, right? When you apply your leave-in conditioner and you seal it with your oil or your butter, you are helping to control how much moisture enters and exits the shaft. I'll take that again. If you do your proper moisturizing process, right, and you twist your hair, what you're doing is you have controlled how much moisture enters and exits the hair shaft, how much moisture is entering the hair shaft, how much moisture is leaving it. You have managed to control it. The leave-in conditioner hydrates the hair, and the oil or the butter forms a barrier. Now, that barrier slows down the moisture loss, which can prevent the hair from absorbing too much moisture too quickly. Okay, another thing is that your twists reduce tension on the hair. Your twist or your braid reduces tension on the hair. So twisting the hair or braiding it after you have moisturized, before you start air drying, can help to keep the cuticles smoother and reduce the amount of stress placed on the hair during the drying process. Remember that the aim is to keep the cuticle intact, to keep it in place, to reduce damage. Okay, so once you have braided or you have twisted your hair, you have managed to reduce the amount of stress on your hair during the drying process. And this can further minimize the risk of the damage. So whether the is twist or is braid, you have ended up minimizing the risk of damage. Also, there's the benefit of gradual drying. Air drying allows the hair to dry slowly, like I mentioned earlier. It will dry slowly and evenly, which can reduce the rapid swelling and shrinking that contributes to hygral fatigue. However, there are potential risks. Again, once you have understood it the way I explained it now, you have things under control and your hair will not, you know, undergo or suffer hygral fatigue. If your hair remains damp for too long, I said we're going to come back to the um, continuously left in damp state for too long. So if your hair remains damp for too long, such as in a humid environment or is tightly twisted for a long time and it doesn't dry on time, it might still be at risk of hygral fatigue. Now, how long does it take your hair to dry? How long does it take your hair to dry? So that too long means that for several days in a week, your hair is wet. And that is most likely not even possible, right? I know that you're not washing your hair several times in a week. Do you get? We'll come back to that. Now, let's look at excessive moisture, which is also a potential risk. If too much leave-in conditioner or too much oil is applied, the hair might take longer to dry, and it will stay in that damp state for an extended period, which can contribute to hygral fatigue. Now, it is important to note here that most times less is more. You don't have to load your hair with products. If you've watched my videos, how I moisturize my hair, I have a lot of hair. My hair is thick, my hair is long. Yet I don't use so much product on my hair. I control the quantity that I use. If you look at the amount of oil I'm putting on my hand to apply on the hair, or the amount of leave-in conditioner, or the butter, everything should be controlled. So even the food that we eat, the food we put in our bodies, if you do it too much, if you overdo it, it will affect your system. So what I'm trying to say is this: your hair will not suffer hygral fatigue as long as you understand how these things work and you know what you're doing. You don't need a lot per section of your hair, just moderate amount, depending on the thickness of the section, depending on the length of your hair. You know when something is too much, you know. So just make sure that you are not overusing the products. You're just using moderate quantity, right? And you will be fine. If you are finished doing your hair, you can just allow the hair, leave it open, let it feel the air, let it dry. All right, let it have the time to dry properly. Also, with deep conditioning their hair, our hair, and covering it, you know how we cover it with a plastic bag, and it's a common practice to help the conditioner to penetrate deeply into the hair. Okay, so whether or not hygral fatigue occurs when you are deep conditioning your hair depends on a few factors. Again, you need to know what you're doing and understand why you are doing what you're doing. All right, we've talked about hygral fatigue, we've talked about how it happens and the fact that your hair has to be exposed for a long period of time to moisture, you know, being wet or damp before your hair, can be exposed to the risk of suffering hygral fatigue. Now, remember that your hair has to be exposed to this wetness or dampness for, let's say, several days in a week, which is most likely not possible. And I know that you're not washing your hair several days in a week. If you're washing your hair like two times a month, it means that your hair has extended period of times that it is not wet. So your hair will most likely not suffer hygral fatigue. Okay, when you deep condition your hair and you cover it with a plastic bag, your hair absorbs moisture and it causes the cuticle to swell, or rather the shaft, it causes the shaft to swell. Okay, but this is typically done as a part of a controlled deep conditioning treatment. It's controlled. It usually does not lead to hygral fatigue, especially if it's done occasionally. You don't deep condition your hair 3 times a week. You don't deep condition your hair 4 times, even 2 times a week. You don't deep condition your hair. Highest once a week. There are people who do once in 2 weeks, which is twice a month. Some once a month, some once in 2 months. So you are not exposing your hair to this condition frequently or continuously. All right, so your hair will not suffer hygral fatigue. Again, speaking about the duration, let's say you are deep conditioning for 2 hours. For example, myself, I used to deep condition for longer hours before, but after I moisture trained my hair, it was easy for my hair to absorb moisture. So I began to cut down the number of hours that I stay with my deep conditioning treatment. So 2 hours is generally, considered a reasonable amount of time for deep conditioning. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody has the way they do it. But as far as I'm concerned, 2 hours is a is a reasonable amount of time. This duration allows the conditioner to work effectively without keeping your hair overly wet for too long. However, leaving the deep conditioner on for much longer, like overnight deep conditioning, can increase the risk of hygral fatigue. Let me explain. You don't have a lot of hair, and your hair is not even the coarse texture. Yet you apply your deep conditioner and you leave it overnight. For what? What's the point? What are you trying to achieve? For people who have more coarse texture, for people who have more dense hair, for people who have more length, that is understandable. And like I said, after a while, if you have moisture trained your hair, you don't need to be doing that. A couple of hours is fine. So you have no business leaving your hair with a deep conditioner overnight if you just have moderate density and your hair texture is just okay. There's no need. There's no need for that. 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you are done. In fact, some people do 25 minutes. If you're under a hooded dryer, a hooded steamer for that they use for deep conditioning, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, you are done. 15 to 25 minutes, you are done, depending on the volume of hair that you have, depending on your density, depending on the length of your hair. Aside from that, if you get to 40 minutes, it's fine. You have a lot of hair, 1 hour, 2 hours, you're done. There's nothing wrong with that. You have no risk. Your hair is not at risk of hygral fatigue. Why? Because you're not deep conditioning your hair every you're not deep conditioning 2 times a week or 3 times a week. You are doing it like at most once in 2 weeks, once a month, once in 3 weeks. So you have no business with hygral fatigue. All right. So just know what you're doing, know why you are doing what you're doing. Another thing is if the hair is already damaged and the hair is already highly porous, that kind of hair is more prone to hygral fatigue because it absorbs and it loses moisture more rapidly. You have dealing with a lot of split ends, dealing with so much breakage, and again, the texture of your hair is too mushy or cotton like. Then, if you expose your hair to moisture for a long time, you don't even need to do it for too long, it will affect the hair. So those are the kind of hairs that are prone to being affected by hygral fatigue very quickly. Under typical conditions, such as deep conditioning your hair for 2 hours occasionally, once in 2 weeks, once in a month, once in 2 months, hygral fatigue is very unlikely to occur. In fact, hygral fatigue is very far away from you. The key is to balance your moisture treatment. And then you give your hair time to dry thoroughly and avoid your hair being in a wet state or a damp state for extended periods of time frequently, which is what I said, that since you are not washing your hair several times in a week, you are not deep conditioning your hair several times a week, and when you moisturize your hair, you use moderate amount of products and allow your hair to receive air and dry properly, you have no business with hygral fatigue. Nobody should confuse you. So this balanced approach that we spoke about, I decided to dissect this um, issue today. I decided to dissect it well so that we all understand it. So if you use this balanced approach, it helps to maintain your hair's elasticity and your hair's strength without leading to hygral fatigue. And if there's anybody watching this video now that didn't understand before, now understands. So you don't have any business with hygral fatigue at all if you do what you're supposed to do the way you're supposed to do it. All right, so I hope that this video helps somebody out there to understand things better. Now, you can share this video with someone or a family member or a friend who you think will benefit from watching. I appreciate you for sticking around and watching and um, dissecting this topic with me. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you again on my next one. Bye-bye.